Good morning. Be just a moment before we get started. Good morning. We'll get started in just a second. Okay. Let's go ahead and get started. Good morning, Sunnyvale. I'm Sunnyvale Mayor Larry Klein. Thanks for joining me again this week for my weekly virtual office hour address. This is the 92nd installment of my weekly office hours. I hope everyone's doing well, staying healthy, getting into the holiday spirit, and of course, staying warm. It was a rainy week, and definitely rain that we needed. We've now reached 641 days since the March 16th, 2020 county health order started the shelter in place in an attempt to slow the spread of COVID-19. 21 months ago, I converted my weekly office hours into virtual office hours. And I haven't missed a week since. I now follow up these live stream addresses with in-person meetings at Bean Scene on Murphy Avenue. But people continue to say that they enjoy hearing from their mayor, and these sessions are really good for me because they allow me to look at the last week and last few weeks and see what's happened. Give you some general words of encouragement, and give you the updates on what's been happening in our city, in our county, and around the nation to some degree. But and I just want to say thank you. This is our season of gratitude. Thanks for allowing me to continue to represent you and work for Sunnyvale. A few months ago, I started changing my background art every week, and this is art provided by Sunnyvale artists, and mainly from the Sunnyvale Art Club. Today's piece is called Journal, and it's by Gianfranco Palozzi. Gianfranco Palozzi. So if you want to purchase this piece, please contact me and I'll put you in contact with the artist. And with that, let's go ahead and get started on what's happened at the federal, state, county, and city level over the last 2 weeks. Last Tuesday, Sunnyvale City Council met, and it was a busy evening. Usually the last few meetings of the year are always pretty busy. We started off with a discussion on outdoor dining, and ultimately we directed to continue the temporary outdoor dining in private parking lots around the city, and the closure of the 100 block of South Murphy Avenue, and that'll be continued until September 30th, 2022. And so that was a unanimous council decision. We ultimately, basically, the city manager is going to start a study issue at the beginning of next year to talk about what the implications of that are. And so that will be finished by September of next year. So that's why we only extended that until the 30th of September. We also accepted LinkedIn's donation of a voluntary bike and pedestrian facility improvements on Maud Avenue. So this is basically between the Sunnyvale Mountain View border and almost Matilda Avenue, about 400 feet shy of Matilda Avenue. And so the estimated construction cost is about $1.2 million. And it's always good when our corporate partners are basically improving our facilities within the city for both residents, for their employees, and so it adds bike boxes at Maud and Mary. So these are making it much safer for people on bikes to actually turn and not have to deal with cars as much. So that's one of the things. There'll be some cameras placed there to monitor the amount of traffic, the number of bicyclists and pedestrians utilizing that intersection. So there's some really good things about LinkedIn providing that support for us. And then of course last Thursday the Senate adopted a bipartisan deal that paves a way for the raising of the debt ceiling, and this allows Congress and the government to prevent we'll say a catastrophic default ahead of the December 15th deadline. And so, in October, Congress had passed an agreement to do a short-term increase until mid-December, kind of punting the issue down the road a little bit. But the compromise basically puts to rest, months of battle between the Democrats and Republicans, and postpone kind of the next round of wrangling over the debt ceiling until after the 2022 midterm election. So it's extended for a year, and we'll see, past that point, what the issues are. But at least it holds that off until a year. Last Saturday was Robots on Ice at the Sunnyvale Ice Rink, and so there were robots, there were RC cars, several demonstrations of those. We also was happy to promote basically Girl Scouts, and brought in a lot of Girl Scouts and young women to learn about programming and highlighting science. It was great to see girls and boys kind of interacting with a lot of the exhibits that were there, enjoying science. And that's one of the biggest things, is getting our youth exposed to all the opportunities that they have available to them as early as possible. And so it was good to be out there, promote, of course, the robots and RC cars on ice, but at the end of the day, it was also good to to promote science and to promote kind of what can be done with programming and electronics and all that. So it was a good afternoon. And then on Monday, the California Department of Public Health announced that face masks are again required at all indoor public settings, regardless of vaccination status, starting on December 15th through January 15th. So this was basically an attempt to slow the spread of the virus, especially during the winter months. It's recommended. They also recommended surgical masks or higher level N95 respirators. And the only broad exceptions were children under 2, people with medical or mental health conditions that were worsened with masks, or the hearing impaired. Of course, during the announcement, Health and Human Services basically didn't specify what would happen in counties that already had carved out specific exemptions for the fully vaccinated. Later in the week they clarified it that local health orders would be honored for those that were in effect before December 15th. So San Francisco, Alameda, Contra Costa counties that removed some of their indoor health order, mask wearing, could continue that. So that's one of the things that did change as far as that's concerned. And then on Tuesday, Council had our final meeting of the year. So we had It was a long evening, lots of things to cover, but for our study session, we discussed possible revisions to our short-term rental laws, and of course, this includes imposing large fines for health and safety issues, and so that is kind of in relationship to the shooting that occurred at one of the Airbnb parties that happened earlier in the year, and then also requiring the permit number for all short-term rental ads. So that's one of the things that Airbnb and VRBO said that they would be willing to do is every person that is part of that service. So every landlord in Sunnyvale that wants to take part in that has to go through a permit process. They get a permit number, and then that permit would be part of their ads. And it would also be easy for the city to revalidate that okay, this person is utilizing the appropriate permit number for their address and all that. That makes it a lot easier from that standpoint to monitor this and making sure and trying to not have a tragic action happen that happened earlier this year at one of the parties that was occurring at an Airbnb home here in Sunnyvale. And then as far as the main meeting, first we officially declared Mason Fong's city council seat number 3 vacant because it was an at-large seat, more importantly, we established the process and kind of the schedule for making that appointment. So we finalized the application, which has now been published online, so people can start applying if they're interested in being appointed to city council. And we also set dates for the interviews. So January 31st and February 2nd, with our final appointment going to be happening on February 8th. So from a process standpoint, that was the best thing that we could do. So because we're conceivably appointing, most importantly, we're appointing after the February 2nd deadline. That would have caused us to, if we'd appointed before that date, we would have actually had to run an at-large election in June, which would cost the city about $250,000. And so this basically allows us to thread that needle and make sure that we appoint after February 2nd, but before the 60 days after December 15th. And so ultimately, when we appoint, that person can be an appointed council member from February through the beginning of January 2022. And later this year, of course, we're electing the other 3 districts. So we're moving the rest of council to district elections. So to have an at-large election in the middle of this year wouldn't have made any sense. We also received the 2020-2022 fiscal year-end report, and we had about 9 million. So on a positive standpoint, we had about 9 million more estimated revenue and about 6 million less in expenditures than we'd initially envisioned at the beginning of 2020 fiscal year, which was July 1st and it goes through June 30th of 2021. And so it takes us a lot. It takes us about 6 months to finalize all the bills, do a final audit and all that. After we committed our reserves, we have about $12 million available for reappropriation. And so those remaining balances will be brought forward for consideration in January. So that'll be happening at the last one of the late meetings in January, once we have the annual comprehensive financial report. So it's from that standpoint, the auditors are finalizing their report. It wasn't with COVID and everything, they weren't able to finalize what they need to do before the end of the year. But we did our final approval, and now at the end of January we get that final report, the comprehensive financial report, as well as the recommendations from city staff, from the city manager, on how to spend that $12 million. And that will be, and there's lots of discussion. One of the things that we do is making sure that our retirement costs are paid down, making sure that we don't have that liability, and then what projects, which programs we would like to initiate for the upcoming year based upon that funding. And so we also, much like the LinkedIn, uh, we also accepted donations from Google, much like the previous week. This time we accepted donations from Google for improvements in Moffett Park. So these were complete street signing and striping improvements, and that was about $750,000 that Google committed to the city, and so that was anything over a certain amount the council does need to approve. And so that was, thanks for Google and LinkedIn for being good corporate partners to the city. And then council also approved the final design for the Redwood Park at the old AMD campus. So that's about a 6.5 acre park with a lot of amenities, a multi-use field, playground area, picnic areas, large and small dog parks. And so, and this is really good because it helps, the old AMD campus, which is about 35 acres. And so about 150 condos as well as about 900 apartments are going in there. And this was a negotiation with the developer to add a park. And so adding a city park that will not just help those residents, but the San Miguel neighborhood, which was underserved as far as parks is concerned, would now have access to a very large park very close by. And so that's really positive from that standpoint. And the developer also, didn't just cut down trees. They actually are relocating. They kept a lot of the old sequoias exactly where they were along Duane, but they also are relocating about 8 large sequoias on site. So these are, 50 to 70-foot trees that'll be moved from their current location to new locations. And so the park will not just have brand new trees just planted that will have to grow. It already have mature trees, which is really fantastic. And then yesterday, President Biden signed the debt ceiling increase bill. So that ensured, of course, that the U.S. would not go into default on its debt for the first time ever. But the legislation raised the debt ceiling $2.5 trillion, and that was sent to Biden on Wednesday. And that basically allows the government to cover the obligation through the end of 2022, into the beginning of 2023. So that debt ceiling is in a much better place now and not going to be an issue for at least another year. And then yesterday, of course, the Santa Clara County Health Officer, Dr. Sarah Cody, said that she expects a deluge of Omicron cases in our county as the COVID-19 variant begins to sweep across the Bay Area, and residents, of course, start traveling and gathering for the holidays. So, although the number of Omicron cases in the county right now remains relatively low, there were only 10 as of Thursday, but there are indications, looking at the data across the U.S., that these will rise relatively soon. So, last week the county announced their first Omicron case, and while Santa Clara County's vaccination rates remain some of the highest in the county, there's still worry because worldwide evidence suggests that that the county and the country won't be able to escape that widespread outbreak of the Omicron variant. So lots of breakthrough cases as far as Omicron is concerned. On the positive standpoint, it seems like it might be more transmissible, but it doesn't seem to be as deadly. But that's still initial reports as far as that's concerned. Let's go ahead and get to our COVID numbers. So from our weekly COVID numbers, from a national standpoint, the Omicron variant is spreading rapidly across the U.S. and across the world. We now have 50.3 million cases. So we've increased by 900,000, and that's in the past week. That's up from 800,000 last week. Nationally, we've had 240 million vaccinated with at least one dose. That's about 85% of adults. and about 72% of adults are fully vaccinated. And as far as deaths, the U.S. passed 800,000 deaths of people with COVID, so having some COVID symptoms. So that's another 10,000 in the last week. So that's up from 9,000 a week ago. So we are seeing more deaths related to COVID, especially during the winter time, of course. And then from California, we've had 4.9 million positive cases. We've jumped to about 5,500 cases a day now. That's about only from 4,500 a day last week. So we've rapidly seen an increase in the number of daily positive cases around the state. We've had almost 75,000 fatalities, and so that's up about 400 deaths just in the last week. But on a positive note, we've had almost 62 million vaccines administered, about 1.5 million just in the last week. And in comparison to other states, we remain about the same with at number 11 with at least with states with residents with at least one shot, which is about 79%, and at number 15 on states with residents that are fully vaccinated at 65%. And the county is doing a fantastic job, getting people vaccinated, getting people their flu shot. They reported yesterday that we passed 154,000 cases, up about 1,100 from last week, but that's down from 1,700 from a week ago. So we've seen that things are relatively steady from our county on the number of cases. We've had 1,924 deaths, additional 6 in the last week. 95% of our county residents 18 and older have at least one dose, and 91% of those 18 and older are fully vaccinated. So that's fantastic. The numbers with the youth are also looking really good. I continue to do lots of advocating for our city, talking to our county health department, talking to our county supervisors, for testing. The county continues to be doing COVID testing at the Sunnyvale Community Center on the first and third Thursdays of the month. So they were here yesterday. They'll be back on June 6th from 9:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. All you need to do is go to secfreetest.org, and what you can do there is go ahead and set up an appointment, and the appointments open up a week ahead of that date when they'll be here. Appointments are available, on a first come first serve basis, and then once the appointments run out, then you can only see other locations around the county where you can get tested. And then if you want to get vaccinated, you can always go to secfreevax.org and see the many places, many pop-up locations around the county that the county runs on a daily basis for people to get their free vaccine shot. Let's go ahead and talk about some upcoming events. Tomorrow, Friends of the Sunnyvale Library have their holiday gift book pop-up sale. That's from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. tomorrow. So they usually have a great selection of books. They don't have the full list of books that they normally have, but they have a good selection of children's gift books and adult fiction, adult nonfiction, coffee